Everybody, welcome to Kinzua Bridge State Park. You're in the lower level exhibits right now. My name's Holly Dzemyan. I'm the Environmental Education Specialist for the park. Accompanying me today is my husband, John Dzemyan. He's retired from the Pennsylvania Game Commission as Wildlife Conservation Officer and Land Manager for Elk and McKean counties.
Yes, I worked here for 36 years, working with wildlife management and do a lot of programs at the park with my wife, so it's a good place to be.
Part of the mission, we're part of DCNR, Bureau of State Parks, and part of our mission is to provide healthful outdoor recreation and to use the park as a classroom for environmental education. So the natural resources are a very important part of what we do and what we are as an organization. And I've been asked to talk to people about our natural resources in the area and connections with the Kinzua Bridge. So to start out with, I would say that when the colonists came over from Europe, the land of Pennsylvania was mainly forested. There were millions of acres of forest, and there were plentiful wildlife all over the state and in this area as well. And think of animals like deer, bear, beaver. There were thousands upon thousands of beavers in the state at that time. People regarded our area here as having an endless supply of wildlife. During that period, there were no hunting regulations. There were no regulations on much of anything as far as resources go. So people thought we had an endless supply of wildlife, an endless supply of trees, and an endless supply of clean water.
Like Holly was saying, the first settlers in the area, they trapped beaver, they harvested deer, and they would sell the hides. And it was easy to get a beaver hide or a deer hide out of the area. You could carry it out on your back, you could use a horse to ride out with it, or take a canoe and leave the area and take it to markets far away. But as time went on and people looked at the timber and timber resources, it was tougher to get timber out of the area, to get logs to sawmills and to the big markets on the East Coast.
The problem of trying to get the trees that were cut down to market, it was very difficult to use a waterway if you weren't close to a waterway. And during the mid to late 1800s, people started laying tracks in the area, and the railroads became a main factor in the harvest and hauling the logs to market. So not only was this area rich with multiple trees that could be harvested to sell, there were also bituminous coal deposits, some in McKean County and more in Elk County, especially southern Elk County. General Kane, who was at the time involved in the Elk and McKean Land Company, had come up to the area from Philadelphia. And with the shares in that company, he was looking for coal, which he did find in Elk County and some in McKean County. And knowing that there were railroad lines up in the town of Bradford and to the north, he wanted to connect those coal fields with the railroad up there to get it to market to places like Buffalo, New York, the Great Lakes, and time was of the essence. So when they were laying track, they came up to this beautiful area here, which is in part of the park, called the Kinzua Creek Valley. He had to choose between going around the valley or crossing it, and he chose to cross it. And because he was competitive and wanted to get his coal to market as soon as he could, he chose the faster route, which would be to build the bridge. When the bridge was built, it wasn't just any other bridge. It was the tallest and longest railroad bridge in the entire world. So that was the reason that the bridge was built, because of getting natural resources to market in a quick and timely way.
When the bridge and the railroad line were finished, one of the first effects was a lot of the wildlife took a beating. Passenger pigeons were being harvested by the millions, and now they could be shipped out by train loads, not going out of here in canoes or down a river on a raft, but train loads of deer hides and bear hides and elk hides, and like I said, passenger pigeons, and all those species of wildlife were taking a beating. There were no regulations on how many you could harvest back then. And then, as more people came to the area, the natural resources started to be heavily used. So as time went on and more people were in the area, the natural resources of wildlife were depleted, and they turned to other forms of natural resources like the timber and the coal.
With the harvesting of the timber, the harvest was done in methods that we would call today clear cuts, where they would go in and cut all the trees in the entire area. And if you take a look at the exhibit here that the camera's focused on, it gives you an idea, what once was a forest is completely barren now. And so not only was that not healthy for the forest, but it caused a change in habitat for wildlife. And so it put them in a perilous position. And after unregulated hunting and trapping, we saw the extirpation, which means the species is gone from a certain area, of a lot of wildlife. And you think of beaver, you think of elk, and many other animal species. The populations dropped.
With the coal resources being extracted in the 1800s, it was amazing because people with picks and shovels dug drift mines into the sides of the hills, and coal at that time was being sold for 3.5 cents a bushel. It was really interesting. But the effects it had on the environment were devastating. The underground tunnels that they built took the coal out, let air into the underground areas, and the air and the water that would come out of those mines or mix in those mines reacted with sulfur rocks that were next to the coal seams, and we ended up with sulfuric acid coming out of the coal mines. So a lot of area streams, especially in Elk County, ended up with mine acid in them. It was called mine acid, and it's sulfuric acid. And the streams, the rocks would be covered with red sulfur and iron deposits, and the water would be sterile. Almost nothing could live in the high acidity waters at that time. After years and years of underground mining, then World War II came along, and strip mining took place. And that's when the whole top of the surface of the landscape would be removed to get to the coal underneath. And those two effects had a devastating impact on a lot of the wildlife and a lot of the natural resources, the timber and the water quality. And at the same time, all those resources were being hauled out of here on railroads. So the railroads were a big important part to get those natural resources to market.
So along with the extraction of the coal, there was also, during that time period that the bridge was constructed, an extreme amount of oil that was found in the area, and gas as well. So there were derricks all over in McKean County, especially around the town of Bradford. I've seen old pictures where there's, 30 to 50 oil derricks in just one picture, one photograph. So oil was another resource that was here in our area, and the railroad played an important part in getting that resource to market as well. Now, as far as the bridge goes, there were some oil cars that used the bridge, but there were a lot of oil machinery and equipment, oil rigs that went across this bridge. So we have, we did have plenty of natural resources in our area that were used for folks to maintain themselves. They had jobs that were involved in the extraction of the resources. Think of the forest and loggers that were involved. They were employed. People that worked at tanneries, coal miners, the folks that worked on the railroad. All sorts of jobs accompanied the extraction of the resources. And they benefited from it, and money was made. There were some people that owned companies that became millionaires from the resources in this area here. But the one thing that stands out is many people thought that there was an infinite supply of these resources, which there was not. And after the years went by, people started to recognize that. Wildlife, some species, like John said, the passenger pigeons, they were hunted to extinction. People started to realize that. So we, the state of Pennsylvania, started creating agencies, state agencies, to regulate and to manage and to keep a check on our natural resources. I think like wildlife, the Game Commission. For the forests, we have the Bureau of Forestry and the Bureau of State Parks. And for mines and gas, I think of the Department of Environmental Protection. So those agencies are kind of keeping an eye on our natural resources today. We've learned a lesson. We don't have an infinite supply of natural resources. We're also concerned about the wildlife, which is some natural resources. A perfect example would be climate change. And if you take a look at the snowshoe hare here in the exhibit, you crank it around, it's showing the coat during the summer, but then during the winter, the snowshoe hare's coat turns white to help it blend in and camouflage itself during the winter with all the snow. So how is climate change going to affect certain species of wildlife and also certain species of plants? And that includes trees as well. So we're studying, we're watching carefully, and we're hoping that our visitors to our parks and state forests also get interested in what's going on with climate change.
The natural resources in the area are still being extracted today. We still harvest timber. There's still oil and gas exploration going on, and those resources are still being used to maintain our society these days. But today, when it's done, there's a lot more rules and regulations, and they're followed, and the devastation is nothing like it used to be. The waters are cleaner now, the air is cleaner now. Even the loggers and the logging roads are built in a way
to prevent siltation going into the stream. So natural resource extraction is still important. Highways and trucks have replaced some of the railroad usage, but the railroads are still important up here. Trains go through McKean County every day hauling coal and oil products to markets. But like I was saying, they do it today with a lot less devastation. And so the wildlife has recovered, and the forests have recovered from the early 1900s and the devastation that was wrought upon the environment. Many species of wildlife today, white-tailed deer, black bear, are in almost record numbers throughout the north central part of Pennsylvania. Turkeys and people come up here hunting and fishing, and all this is being done in an area that's a working forest, you know, where natural resources are still being extracted.
And John's right with the regulations that we have for many of our natural resources. Hunting comes to mind right away. The Pennsylvania Game Commission is regulating and managing the wildlife for hunting, and we find that our hunters are some of our greatest conservationists in our state. And also with the regulations that we have on the coal industry, there's still jobs there for people, but the coal extraction itself is being done in a more environmentally friendly way. The same way with timber harvesting. We still harvest timber, but we do it in a sustainable way to make sure that these resources are here for future generations. I want my kids and grandkids to make sure that they're able to enjoy our natural resources just like our grandparents did. So with this in mind, you know, how do people help with our natural resources and making sure that things are being done sustainably? I would say support our state agencies that manage and regulate these things. And also, there are little things that you can do. Get involved with conservation groups. If you see the need that some more trees need to be in an area, plant some more trees. That's a great way to help. There are volunteer opportunities in every state park and every state forest for folks to help with the conservation effort. And also, there are some private groups that would use volunteers or would help with different things. And the ones that come to my mind right away, the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, the Nature Conservancy, Rough Grouse Society, Wildlife for Everyone. So there are many different nonprofit groups out there people can join to help with conserving our natural resources. And I do want to say, some folks quite a long time ago thought about things like this and set aside our state forests and our state parks for our people to be able to go outside and recreate and have fun and just relax while they're in the outdoors. So there's many different things that can be done. So there are other ways that you can help. Go to our website, www.dcnr.pa.gov, and there are opportunities to become a conservation volunteer. And if you go to our park page, Kinzua Bridge State Park, you will see different programs listed that you can come to the park and visit and learn something more or to participate in outdoor recreation. Thanks. So with everything being said, your state parks and your state forestry lands were set aside for everyone to come out and enjoy healthful recreation. So we invite you to come out and use the parks and to develop a stewardship of many different natural resources that we find within the state. The park is here to tell the story of the natural resources.